Today I'm going to be doing a demonstration on what needs to happen for your Andy Warhol inspired portrait #1. First of all, I'm going to show you on my PS Learning page. You can scroll through this and you can look at a little slideshow about Andy Warhol and some other very popular pop artists from the pop art era. I do have written directions here in case that is something you like to read over. If you're in person, those are also printed in the binders that are at the end of your table. These are some student examples of what we're going for Andy Warhol inspired portrait #1. So we're looking for a brush tool drawing that is an outline of anything that's of importance in your image. So you'll notice that there's a lot of outlining of eyes, eyebrows, noses, mouths, face shapes, hair, ears. Make sure you do the neck and shoulders. Give yourself something other than just like a floating head. I will go through how to fill these in using the paint bucket as one option. And then also making a new layer and drawing underneath your brush tool drawing for the outline of the features. So a couple different ways you can go about doing portrait #1. So first things first, for this semester, I'm going to have everybody choose somebody to work on instead of back in the day when I had everybody do themselves for this project. So I'm going to bring up Google and I am going to look up somebody. So I'm going to choose Andy Warhol, the artist. This needs to be an actual physical person. They don't have to be alive anymore, but I want it to be a real human being. This could be somebody famous. It could be an artist. It could be a sports figure. It could be a political figure, historical figure, actor, actress, model, musician. You get to pick the person that you want to do. So you're going to Google their name and you're going to choose images because we need to find a pretty good image to work with. I recommend working with a face and having a neck and a small part of the shoulders showing. Before I get too far, I'm going to go to Tools and change the size to large. This is going to limit my search to being large, workable images that I'm going to be able to copy and paste into my document. So you can scroll through and you can try to find something that appeals to you. You can crop these images. So let's say that I really like this image here on the left, but there's a lot going on in the background. I could crop this image to just be the face and shoulders. I actually kind of liked one of the first ones up here. I'm going to choose this particular photo here. So I'm going to click on it. And then I'm going to right click on this photo after it loads here. And I'm going to copy the image. Okay, so copying it from the internet. And then I'm going to open up Adobe Photoshop, which I have pinned to the bottom of my computer here. And I'm going to create a new document. And I'm going to label this Warhol because that's the artist that we're inspired by for this portrait. I happen to be doing the portrait of Andy Warhol, so it kind of makes sense both ways for me. This defaults to pixels, so a few different things I can do. I have some presets here that I can just switch it to. Otherwise, you can change it from pixels to inches. Remember, a piece of paper is 8.5 for the width, 11 for the height, 300 for the resolution. Go ahead and hit create. And this is going to be your workspace. So you have a blank white piece of paper here. You can hit Control V to paste, or you can go to edit and paste, same thing. The only thing you can't do is right click and paste like you could in like a Google Doc. Now this particular image, I've got all of this white space around it and I want this to take up most of my piece of paper. So to change the size, remember the shortcut is Control T, short for transform. You can also go to edit free transform. So you can see that right there. Control T is the shortcut. And then I'm just going to extend this. Now I have a few different options here. I can extend it like so, and then just, I will have all this background and this white space. Or I can make this bigger and make it more cropped, which I think I'm going to do. So I'm just going to extend this so that Andy Warhol takes up most of my piece of paper here. And then anything that's not showing on my paper, these areas to the left and the right and the bottom are going to get cut off. Just going to hit the Enter key. And there we go. I've got my image in my piece of paper. Before I do anything, I am going to hit the little lock button above my layer 1 so that this stays where it's at. Click that. So that way I don't accidentally draw on the top of it. So I tried to do the brush tool drawing for the hair. Could not use the brush tool because the layer is locked. I did that on purpose because you don't want to do any work in your layer 1. I'm going to come down to the bottom next to the garbage can, and I'm going to click the new layer button. And then this is going to be the area that I do my drawing. So I can actually double click layer 1 label here, and I can label this original 1. And then my layer 2, I can do brush tool 1, because this is going to be my Warhol 1. So here we go. I've got my brand new layer. This gray and white checkerboard represents transparent. So there's nothing in this layer. It is just see-through right now. So let's say that I wanted to outline Andy Warhol and his features using the black brush. Right now I've got teal and white selected. If I click on this small little black and white box here that's in the bottom of my tools panel, it's going to default to pure black. Okay. And then I can go to my paintbrush tool, and then I can start drawing in. Now, this is pretty zoomed out, and I'm not going to be able to draw very accurately. So I highly recommend using my magnifying glass. Z is the shortcut for the magnifying glass, and I can zoom in on my picture. So I'm going to go back to my brush tool. So I've got black selected, and I can bring up my brushes over on the right-hand side, and I can take a peek and I can go through and find a brush to work with. For Warhol Inspired number 1, I'm just going to stick with a regular old hard round brush. I'm not going to do anything super fancy because I just kind of need to get some experience. So I'm going with black, going with the hard round, and I can hit this little double arrow to collapse that. Okay. If you're using the stylus and the, I can't think of the name of it, the drawing pad in class, if you hover over it, you can put your hand on the drawing pad and you'll see where your stylus is going to pick up here. This little bullseye here, if this is selected and it's grayed out, that means it's pressure sensitive. So the harder I press, the darker that line is. And the lighter I press, the lighter that line is. So by having that selected, it lets you play with the pressure. Control Z will undo. So I'm just clicking Control Z on my keyboard to undo those steps. Okay, so my goal is to outline the features. If I want to make my brush quicker or bigger quickly, I can hit the bracket key. So the right bracket will make my brush bigger. The left bracket will make my brush smaller. You can also change that here in the brush size. So you can also toggle that back and forth. For me, the bracket is kind of nice. And then I'm just going to take my brush, my stylus here, and I'm going to start drawing what I see. Right? So I'm kind of looking for those shadow areas, trying to find areas that are high contrast. And I'm drawing in lines to represent those value changes. Now I've done the right eye. I want to move over and do the left eye, but let's say I want to move my canvas over. If I hold the space bar, this is going to let me use the hand tool, which lets me zip around my image really quickly. Okay, so just kind of going through and trying to find some shapes. If I want to see my work, I can click on the eyeball next to original one, which is my original photo layer, and you can see the work that I have just created. Okay, so you can toggle between those by hiding the original photo and showing it. If I want to zoom out quickly, I can double click the hand tool and it brings my picture into full view, and then I can hide and show. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes and I'm going to zip around here and try to get some more of this portrait done so that I can show you how to do the next step. Okay, so for the paint bucket, a few little tidbits of information. I purposely, when I did this particular line drawing, I made sure that a lot of my shapes were closed. So closed shapes would be like this right here, this reflection in the glasses. Notice how it's totally closed off. But then the center part of the glasses, this is an open shape. And you can see that by right here. You can see that it goes all the way around and it's open. So a lot of these shapes that I did were purposefully closed so that I can use the paint bucket. The first drawing that I did, I have a lot of these open shapes. So I have two of them to show you two different ways of filling in with color. One isn't better than the other. It just depends on the style that you are drawing in and how many open shapes you have. So I'm going to start first with the paint bucket for those of you that have closed shapes. So mine's a little bit different because I chose a black and white photo, which isn't really the best for this demo, but you're going to get the idea. The paint bucket is hidden underneath your gradient tool. So your gradient tool is about halfway down in the toolbox. If you right click on it, you're going to find the paint bucket. And if you've used any like Microsoft Paint in the past, you know exactly what the paint bucket does. It fills in with a color. Now, Photoshop is really awesome because you can sample colors and fill them in. So for example, with my paint bucket selected, if I hold Alt on my keyboard, notice how my paint bucket changes to the eyedropper tool, which is short for the sampling tool. So I can sample colors, I can let go of Alt, and I can fill them in with the paint bucket. So let me just show you what this looks like. So if I'm holding Alt on my keyboard, and I click on Andy Warhol's forehead, notice how the top of this circle is like a really light gray. But as I scroll up here, it changes to a darker gray. My eyedropper is sampling the color that is underneath it. So there's millions and millions of colors of pixels in here. So you can kind of zip around your image and you can take a look at what those colors are going to be. Now, if I want to fill, let's say, his nose in, I'm not going to pick this shadow color, and I'm not going to pick the really, really highlight color. I'm going to kind of pick like a medium tone here. So I'm going to sample like this gray here, and I'm going to let go of Alt, and I'm going to click it, and I'm going to fill that in. So you can see I just filled in his nose here. And you can hide your original photo just by clicking the eyeball here to bring it forward and to hide it. So your paint bucket is going to be happening in your layer that your drawing is going in. Okay, so I'll show you another area. So if I hold Alt and I do this eyebrow color, again, I don't want to pick the darkest color and I'm not going to pick the lightest color. I'm going to kind of find a medium color and then I'm going to fill that in. So you can see what that starts to look like. So I'm just going around the face. I'm picking Alt and I am picking a color and I am filling those areas in. Quickly, because most of my shapes here are closed, I did that on purpose so that I could do this demo pretty easily for everybody. I'm going to show you in just a second the second option. So this right now, this is so far what my portrait looks like using the paint bucket with my clean shaped lines. Now, let's say that your brush looks more like this, where you have a lot of open areas. Okay, using the paint bucket isn't going to really be as effective. So if I hold Alt and actually let me zoom out a little bit. If I hold Alt with my paint bucket and I take like the face color and I try to fill it in, notice how it filled in like his hair, his eyebrow, his eyes. Like using the paint bucket, if you're more of a drawer like this, isn't going to be really effective. So I'm actually going to Control Z that and go back. So if you have lines that are more like this, what I would recommend is making a brand new layer, taking that layer and dragging it underneath your brush tool drawing layer. And then this is going to be it's kind of like you're using a coloring book. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I'm going to go to my paintbrush tool. Shortcut to make your brush bigger and smaller are the bracket keys. So if I hit the right bracket on my keyboard, notice how my brush is getting bigger. Okay, left bracket, it gets smaller. And in real life, Andy Warhol was more of like a blonde-haired fella. So I'm going to pick kind of a yellow color for his hair. That's a little bit green. I'm going to try to make it a little more yellowy. And I can start kind of coloring in his hair color by using my brush tool. Again, I use my brackets to make my brush bigger. And I'm just kind of filling in. And the reason this is going underneath my black lines is because I have a new layer that's underneath my lines. So that's the color. Those are my lines. You can see what that looks like. Okay, so this is another option for filling in if the paint bucket isn't really your friend because you have a lot of open shapes. Like I said earlier, one really isn't better than the other. It's really just kind of like what you want to do. If I want to switch to like a skin tone for him, Andy Warhol was kind of like more of a pale kind of a guy. So I'm going to kind of find more of like a pale skin tone for him here. And then I'm going to go to and I'm going to start filling that color in. Okay, so you can use your brush tool. You can fill it in just by painting, or you can use your paint bucket. Either one works for me.